Hello, this is Dr. Tina. Welcome to Faith Values. Faith Values is a space where we create bonds, we light paths, and ignite change. Um, our purpose is to find our faith, our value in our faith and not others' beliefs. Before we get started, I would like to introduce my partner.
Hi, I'm Dr. Shelle Mathis. I'm a licensed Christian counselor, and thank you, Dr. Tina, for inviting me.
Oh, you're welcome. Today, our focus on our segment is going to be around the transfer of trauma. We will spend our first three segments talking about the impacts of the transfer of trauma, not only on our children, today will be on our children. Our next segment will focus on our intimate relationships and our attachment to toxic relationships and the effects of trauma on our job situations. So, before we get started today, diving into Dr. Shelley's analysis of what's happening, how do we recover from all this, and talking about the transfer of trauma, which we're starting today. I really wanted to give a little quote about how is it that we can heal someone from trauma or a situation when we're not healed ourselves. So that is a quote that God gave me, that we oftentimes try to heal and shield our children specifically from things that we are not healed from.
Mhm.
So it's like when you're in the airplane, they will ask you to put your mask on first before you try to help someone else. Because I thought about that. God was just saying, if you try to help somebody else and you don't have breath in you, you're both
Mhm.
going to die, right?
Mhm.
And
Right.
so it's very important that we understand that transfer of trauma. I recently went to a concert and there was a lot of people there. And I started thinking to myself, we oftentimes spend a lot of money on concerts, on tickets for events, to go out of town, our hair. Um, we invest in other people for that one time or that week thrill or whatever, for that one time excitement. But are we willing to make investments in something that's going to be life changing for us? And that includes Christian counseling or the counselor of your choice.
Mhm.
We're not often willing sometimes to do those things. So I want to talk about my situation of this transfer of trauma. So I know in school, I was bullied a lot because of my color, being of darker complexion. And I was always very, very thin. And so people will find something always to bully you about. So that brought about a little bit of emotional distress and trauma, because bullying does affect you emotionally. Also, there was other things that I felt about my self-esteem. So I would try to do whatever I can to do everything perfect, not to make any mistakes. I didn't want any attention drawn to me. Just wanting to be perfect and finding my value in people liking me and finding my value in success and academics. And unfortunately, relationships, trying to find my value in that. And many of
Mhm.
us out there know when we try to find our value in men, whether it's drugs or alcohol, whatever your vice is, um, it does not give you value. It's
Mhm.
not self-sustaining, because as soon as something happens or something goes wrong, then that's going to affect your value.
Mhm.
So after all of my bad experiences, specifically around relationships and just emotionally being not feeling good about myself and how that affected my self-esteem, my lifelong goal when I finally, when you come to yourself, I said, okay, as a parent, my daughters become, especially when they become teenagers, I said, I'm going to do whatever I can to make sure that she does not go through the same thing that I went to. I remember crying in my pastor's office saying, oh, please help me. I don't want her to ever feel any type of pain that I'm feeling or go through anything that I went to. I don't want her to ever to feel unworthy about herself, and she needs to find her value in men. Um, and so I remember him saying, oh, you do not have to, you turned out okay. And so
Mhm.
basically what he was saying, that everybody has to have their journey.
Mhm.
Um, but I was thinking, like, my daughter is my life. I made it my life mission to make sure that I shield her from going through any type of pain. But essentially, Dr. Shelley, in our talking offline as well, that really hurts or hurt our children more than it helps,
Mhm.
because we're giving them something that they had nothing to do with. And
Mhm.
that shields them having their identity. So, Dr.
Mhm.
Shelley, if you can talk about trauma, and if you can talk about this whole situation and kind of put some wording behind it to help us to understand this.
Okay. And so let's talk first about defining what trauma is. And trauma results from exposure to an incident or a series of events that are emotionally disturbing or life threatening with lasting adverse effects on a individual's or a person's functioning, their mental, their physical, their social, emotional, and or their spiritual well-being. And so some of these experiences that can be traumatic could be physical, sexual, or emotional abuse. We can do childhood neglect, living with a member that has a mental illness or a substance abuse disorder, sudden unexplained separation from a loved one, which that's where you are,
Mhm,
poverty, racism, criticism, and oppression, violence in the community, war, or terrorism. All of these things can bring about a traumatic event. Now, going to you, when you were talking about your daughter and making your daughter your life, which what happens is a lot of people do that because they do not want their children, their legacy to go through what they had to do to get where they are. And so what happens is when you make your child your life, you are you're committing yourself to saying, I'm going to commit my whole entire life with being with my child. I'm never going to leave them. I'm never going to separate from them. But then what happens is we forget that our kids are going to grow up and have lives of their own. It's
mhm,
easy to start that commitment up until a point. But when we start saying, well, my child is, I live for my children. My child is my children in my life, then what you're doing is you're asking your child to commit to your commitment of what they don't have a clue about. Okay. And
mhm,
so what happens is that then that child goes through, they have to, the transfer of your trauma gets on them because of your fear or what you don't want
mhm,
them to go through, or like you told me before, the situationships that you
mhm.
were talking about. You don't want them to go through it. So what happens is you get triggered by certain things that happens in your child's life. I just want to talk there for just a moment. And what
Yes.
happens is that child might see a guy, meet a guy, and your trauma was with a relationship with a guy. And so when you first see this guy, immediately you get triggered because he may look, may sound, may walk, may have said something that triggered you to go back and say, man, he's just like John. I knew he's like John. And he is nowhere near John. He just had
Mhm,
this behavior that reminded you of John, and your remembrance of John was not good. And so what you do is you transfer that onto her. When her dude leaves, then you come to her and you say you can't see him no more because he's no good and he's this and he's that.
mhm.
And you just met him for the first time. And
Yeah.
unbeknownst to you, she been with him for 3 months.
Mhm. Yes.
Okay, but you just met him for the first time, and it's because of of your trauma. You now are transferring that over into your child's life because of fear. Because of
Mhm,
fear. you're fearing and you're saying, I don't want them to go through this, so I'll make sure that they don't. I want them to have the best schools, or I want them to have the best car, or I want them to wear the best clothes, or I want them to, but you're tying that to a commitment to say that they are my life. You
Mhm.
understand what I'm saying?
Yeah.
And that commitment, they have no idea that you just committed your life to being with them, with you
Mhm.
being with them. And so we have to step back for a minute and look, because our hurt and our pain, we can transfer that over into our children. Let me give you one more thing. I remember this saying a long time ago, the grandmother, great grandma, cut the one little girl asked the mother, Mom, Thanksgiving, why you cut the tail off the turkey? And the mother said, Well, my mother did it. And she goes to the grandmother, Grandma, why you cut the
Mhm.
tail off the turkey? She said, Well, my mother did it. And if great grandma is living, then she goes to great grandma, why do you cut it off? Why did you cut the tail off the turkey? And great grandma says, So it'll fit in the pot better. But we
Mhm.
doing stuff without us even knowing. So what we're doing is we're constantly in a traumatic state, if you will, without understanding why are we still here, and then we transfer
Yes.
that back to our children, because one, we haven't gotten help. We haven't sought help for this. We're not recognizing that we're going through this because we're in
Yes.
denial. Out of sight, out of mind. I'm not with them no
Yes.
more. I don't go to the church no more. I don't go to the job no more. So everything's supposed to be all right. And it's not, because that
Mhm.
trauma stays lying in there until somebody triggers you, okay,
Mhm.
to feel a certain way again or to respond a certain way again.
Okay. And so thank you for explaining it that way, because now my daughter, she's fine now. She's 35. So I would say that this probably, I think she's 35. Once they get a certain age, and it's like you tend to forget, and I shouldn't forget, but so it was more so like when she was a teenager. And I think especially when they're younger, you can control more, right?
Yeah,
You
yeah.
can control, because no, you can't go. They don't. You have to drive them everywhere. They're not going to be over anybody's house. They don't have a car. So I think for me, it was okay. The trigger was being when I didn't have as much control, and this
Mhm.
was more so when she was a teenager, and then she had her car. It's like, oh, I have to busy her. I have to make sure that she's doing different things so that she's not worrying of, like getting into this emotional state. So I think, yes, with relationships, it might have been an issue, but it was more so that I wanted her to be emotionally happy.
Okay.
Because overall she was and still is, a great person. When it comes to relationships, she always says, "Oh, I want you to," or "You should have had a child who was a little misbehave a lot," because I was an angel child, which for the most part she was.
Mhm.
Um, it just, I believe when she became a teenager where I didn't have control and the dating started, it's like, oh, what can I can't do anything now. And so then once she was okay, I knew that she was emotionally healthy, then you transfer that over to your relationships. It's just like, I think instead of me dealing with the situation of me and why I felt that way, then you try to find value in your relationships. And then if you don't can't find the value in relationships, and you find it in your job. And then so with me, it's like when I got hurt, um, I just couldn't. It was just really, if God is just saying, it was a deliverance of me of being liked, right?
Mhm.
I
Mhm.
think God had to deliver me, like th- the issue of always wanting everybody to like me.
Mhm. Mhm.
So I'm
Mhm.
thanking God for that. So I want to thank Dr. Shelley, um, for helping us to better understand, what trauma is, and how detrimental trauma can be when we transfer that over to others. I do want to end with this funny story before we tell you about our next session. I remember when she was getting ready to go to college. Um, I was super happy. And but again, as I said, I was lost because I made her my life. And I
Mhm.
just felt like I didn't have anything because she left and she took my life with her. So that's why it's very important. We do love our children, but we have to talk with them. We have to be communicative with them, communicate with them. We have to love them and cherish them. Um, but we have to realize that they're a part of our life, and our
Mhm.
value is found in our faith and not in other people's beliefs.
There you
We
go.
thank you for joining us. Dr. Shelley, do you have any last words?
Think the biggest thing for those of you who are going through traumatic events is to seek the help, is to get the help that you need, and so that way you are not transferring the trauma, or you're not staying in a place of trauma. I think that is huge right now. That's a big thing, and I want you to seek out, and I want to use a different word of healthy, and seek out a person or a counselor that you can feel emotionally safe. You want to be
Mhm.
emotionally safe. Okay. And that's all. That's it.
Okay, okay, thank you. If you
You're
do
welcome.
have questions, thank you. If you do have questions, if you wanted to seek out services from a safe counselor, please connect with me. And I can connect you with Dr. Shelley, or we can connect you with a resource. My email is tlallen5050 at gmail.com. Again, tlallen5050 at gmail.com. Thank you for joining us. And remember, your faith defines your value. It's found in your faith. Your value is found in your faith and not others, what others believe. Please join us next week when we'll talk about how trauma affects our intimate relationships. God bless.